Rewind-A-Dynamite from the post-wrestling site. AEW, lighting up the fuse. Sit back and enjoy the bubbly as we hear from John and Wai Ting. Where we're going, we don't need roads. And if the buck stops here, this thing might blow. Everything you hear are opinions of the show. And if you don't like it, go to the forums and let them know.
Welcome, everybody. It is November 5th by the time you're listening to this, wherever you are in the world. And as far as I know, we still do not officially have a president-elect yet. You're going to have to wait a bit longer. You might even have to wait a bit longer for John Pollock's reaction to it, of course, because John is not joining me tonight. He is taking also a much-deserved night off, much like I did on Monday. And in his place, somebody that John and I both really want to get on for one of these guest host spots eventually. He is somebody who has called in previously to our shows. He is somebody who is a former executive producer for Rewind-A many times. Anytime we've had on, we've really admired his knowledge and his ability to articulate his thoughts. So we definitely wanted to get him on to one of these editions of Rewind-A-Dynamite to share his thoughts on the current AEW product. And his name is Bruce Lord. Bruce, how you doing, man?
I'm doing lovely, and I'm doing especially lovely after that wonderful little intro here. I'm blushing over here in Vancouver right now, Wai.
Vancouver, how are things currently over there?
I mean, like everybody else, we've just spent the last, 24 plus hours, glued to websites, glued to the TV, hitting refresh on all of your various electoral maps and everything like that. In addition, we're now kind of officially going through that kind of really major sort of second wave or second spike of new COVID cases that, Ontario and Quebec were dealing with a little bit early, and we were kind of sitting on our high horses for a couple of months about, but nope, we're right back in the thick of it. So, yeah, we're kind of up to high dough over here right now.
We're not going to spend too much time on the election on this show. There are plenty of sources that I'm sure everybody has for all of that. But, I'm just really curious, Bruce, how did you spend your Tuesday and maybe even early part of Wednesday watching the coverage?
Oh, yeah. I was up until, I think about 3:30 local time here. So that would have been, I think, about half an hour after there was that big dramatic Wisconsin swing that kind of looks theoretically as though it's maybe changed the shape of things. But yeah, no,
I can tell you that I have not expected to talk about or think about Wisconsin. I don't know if I've ever thought about Wisconsin this much in my entire life.
I mean, I have a few friends who live there, but really it's cheese, the Brewers, Robin Yount. That's about all I know. And whatever, that 70s show. That's about all I could give you right now, I think.
It felt like, just a major sporting event, honestly, except with far more greater ramifications and
massive consequences for everybody. Certainly not Americans. I mean, as Canadians, and I don't exactly know what the demographics of the post listenership are in terms of a per country sort of basis, but I always do find that Americans are, at least some, are still kind of somewhat shocked by the degree to which, just out of necessity, Canadians end up being drawn into the orbit of these, very intense, very tense and often very brutal and ugly election cycles in the U.S. And it's a weird, position that we're in, because on the one hand we can sort of go, whew, glad that's our election process doesn't go on for a whole year. But on the other hand, it's almost like we're sort of held as emotional hostages or something. We have to care about it, but there's nothing we can do about it. We can't affect it in any way.
Well, speaking as just somebody from Toronto, I mean, so much of, I think, our culture is so tied to what we are, what we get from the U.S. And I would extend, so much of, I think, our business, is so tied to our economy is so tied to what's going on in the U.S. and just even, in terms of I don't know, just a socio-political level. I feel like we're always reflecting what is going on down there. So it's absolutely of interest to, I would say, people over here. Other parts of Canada, I can't really say, but nonetheless, we await, maybe by the time people are listening to this in the morning, there will actually be a result. But for the time being, we're going to shelve the election talk right there, and we're just going to get into All the wrestling news from postwrestling.com. This is mainly courtesy of Andrew Thompson and John Pollock's great work up there. The first thing we have right now is the Raw rating from Monday night. 1.66 million viewers and a 0.48 in the prime demo of 18 to 49. This is the lowest of the ThunderDome era. The figures represented declines of 4.4% in viewers and 6% in the demo as the show finished 9th amongst all the cable programs. It was Raw's 4th lowest viewership figure of 2020 and its lowest demo rating since September the 7th. This show was most notable for a big collapse in hour 3 with a 17.7% drop from the first hour to the third. And beyond that, Raw's chief competition on Monday was a Monday Night Football game between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the New York Giants that averaged 11.7 million viewers on ESPN. How much of Raw are you watching, if at all?
Absolutely none right now. This is what you and John are for in my book, is you watching it so I don't have to. Personally, I've just almost entirely checked out on main roster WWE product for the last few years. Every now and again, you'll hear something about, for instance, your guys' discussion of the Roman Reigns and Usos storyline, which does sound like it's actually sort of the compelling Roman Reigns storyline that everybody had kind of been hoping for, at least ever since the Shield split there. But really, I'd find, for years there, I just kind of felt like I was sort of, Charlie Brown chasing after the football, right? Oh, when this can't miss prospect gets called up, then surely we'll sort of see some transformation of the business, or, oh yeah, definitely we're going to see a shift over to the youth movement and this and that, and it never ends up really coming to pass. So especially once AEW got started, with just the whole range of other options, at least pre-COVID, that were available even in North America. I've got more than enough on my table to kind of keep me going without keeping up with main roster WWE. And again, you and John put out a product that is so much more sensible, logical, and entertaining in discussing it and reviewing it the day after, that I'm perfectly happy with that.
I appreciate that, because I was able to kind of be in those shoes this past Monday, not having to watch Raw, at least live on Monday, and just being able to listen to John and Nate after the fact. And it's first of all, I felt just incredible freedom that evening, that I hadn't felt in quite a while. But nonetheless, I will say, even, I often get asked, if I wasn't doing this show, would I continue to watch Raw? And I just found myself, granted this is just 1 week off, but I'm always it always feels like Monday. I'm curious, at least, to know what's going on WWE television. So I think that's what I continue to do on Monday. I didn't sit down, I wasn't taking notes, and I actually found the show far more enjoyable that way. But I still found myself curious and watching. So, I imagine many people go through perhaps that before just completely falling off, but I do wonder if many fans still exist that are just at least, tuning in out of curiosity.
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly with, the whole, empty arenas, ThunderDome, everything seems so kind of up in the air and chaotic in terms of format and presentation of professional wrestling just across the board, for better or for worse, that I think they're, as you're sort of saying there, the curiosity factor, how the hell are they going to adjust to this? Or, oh geez, people were kind of trolling and photobombing the videos on the ThunderDome screens there. How are they going to react to that? This whole story of just navigating 2020, becomes kind of a meta storyline of pro wrestling in and of itself right now.
Let's get into some AEW news. Scorpio Sky. AEW today announced that Scorpio Sky was off of tonight's episode. He was scheduled to be in a match against Shawn Spears, of course. This comes as a precaution. Through AEW tweeted out earlier today, through contact tracing, AEW has learned Scorpio Sky was exposed to someone with COVID-19 within the last 14 days. An initial test was negative, but AEW has decided to postpone tonight's scheduled match. So just a precaution, it seems like. So we'll probably get that match at a later time. Allysin Kay is now officially a free agent after being signed to the NWA since spring of 2019, and announced today by AEW was her debut in AEW coming on this Sunday this Saturday on the buy-in ahead of Full Gear. She will be challenging Serena Deeb for the NWA Championship, the championship that she held for a better part of the past year. So Allysin Kay making her way into AEW. And any thoughts on Allysin Kay coming in?
I mean, I really enjoyed her run with the title. I was a big fan of Power when it was running. I mean, that was kind of my, like, again, if you're talking there about kind of being able to put your foot up and your feet up and just sort of watch wrestling in a stress-free environment. Power was the ultimate, just sort of, I can just relax for 45 minutes, an hour, just throw YouTube on a Tuesday night and just kind of, have this very throwback presentation given to me. So I really like that. And I did like her run with it, with the title. And then obviously, when Thunder Rosa really caught fire, that became an interesting storyline in and of itself. I mean, it's kind of a bit of an odd thing that we have so much NWA crossover happening in AEW. I'm not necessarily opposed to it, but it kind of does, I don't know, it sort of puts AEW in an interesting position concerning all of the questions about their own women's division, which I have various thoughts about. The fact that, it's a title match for, a theoretically pretty prestigious title that is on the buy-in. Maybe that's a bit less than ideal from kind of an optics perspective, maybe as far as the NWA is concerned. But, it exposes more people, I think, to the fact that, that the NWA is, or at least was, doing a lot of stuff and is trying to stay active again. In this kind of strange time, doing work with AEW, doing work with Championship Wrestling from Hollywood and the primetime live shows and things like that. So yeah, I mean, if she is in fact a free agent, I think AEW is in a position where there's still a lot of room to sign, pretty veteran, able women's talent. So yeah, interesting days ahead, I think, as far as the NWA women's title goes.
It continues like what appears on the surface to be somewhat of a mass exodus of like talents from the NWA as their contracts are running out, which is kind of unfortunate for that brand, and really it makes you wonder like what the future plans are for it, if Power ever will come back, if any original programming outside of what they're doing with the pay-per-views individually. If anything's going to happen, but their loss is certainly like AEW's gain, and we don't know if Allysin Kay will be signed full time yet. I mean, I look very much to this very much like a tryout, like they've had for many of the other people coming in the past. But I have no doubt Allysin Kay will be a tremendous fit for that division. It's a division that sorely needs, I think, veterans like her who can speak and have personality, and she certainly has that. So I look forward to seeing her. I'm sure putting, forth her very best effort on Saturday.
Yeah, definitely.
Also on the AEW front, excuse me, Anthony Bowens and Max Caster have both signed with AEW. Tony Khan revealed this to PW Insider earlier in the week that AEW has signed the two prospects who will now be known as a tag team called The Acclaimed. PW Insider also adds that WWE had interest in Bowen in particular for their NXT brand. So, that's just even speaking about Allysin Kay, like it's something that you assume that, maybe she'll be a part of AEW's roster. Really kind of forgetting that there still happens to be, I guess, these sort of, this competition for talent right now between several brands, but chiefly I guess here AEW and WWE. So we shall see. At least we know these two are signed, but we shall see what happens with several others. Heel by Nature reports that WWE has surrendered their registration trademark for Cody Rhodes. On November 2nd, WWE filed a cancellation notice with the United States Patent and Trademark Office, surrendering the Cody Rhodes trademark. HeelByNature.com has also confirmed that the cancellation was finalized Wednesday with the trademark office. Cody had attempted to secure rights with the expired trademark earlier this year following its expiration. However, WWE's subsequent renewal caused complications, and it is unknown right now what led to WWE's abandoning of the trademark, but it has to be a really good sign for Cody finally obtaining it.
Yeah, I mean, he's, kind of, obviously he's made a real public demonstration of sort of, well, that's, whatever. I don't need that name in order to, to present myself as a superstar. And, and I think he's done a very admirable job of doing that. But yeah, I mean, there was a lot of, I think there was a lot of, kind of telephone back and forth as to whether or not he could or could not use the game. And, that kind of got a little bit obfuscated there. But certainly the fact that, it looked from the outside as though the WWE was holding on to that, just to spite someone, when it has obviously such a clear connection to his family, to his father, and his father's very complex history with the WWE. It did look, kind of paint them in a bit of a petty light there. So, yeah, if for whatever reason they just don't see any value in doing that anymore, sure, fine. Again, Cody has shown that he doesn't need Rhodes where he's going, as the intro song goes, but couldn't help to have some alternate routes, I suppose.
ACH set to return to MLW, and Lio Rush is also set to debut. Both are scheduled to appear in MLW's return show called The Restart, which takes place Wednesday, November 18th on Fubo Sports and the MLW YouTube channel. This taped event will be MLW's first event since March, so we look forward to all that. And our final story, we said we wouldn't talk about politics very much, but I'm going to make an exception here. Tito Ortiz, former UFC light heavyweight champion and Hall of Famer, has won a seat in the city council in Huntington Beach, California. The 45-year-old man ran on a heavy conservative platform, linking himself to President Donald Trump, with Ortiz often spreading erroneous conspiracy theories throughout his campaign. The city council had 3 seats up for grabs, with Ortiz topping all other candidates with 14.3% of the vote. That equaled 34,901 votes. Well... what can you say?
Yeah, really. I mean, I'm not a big MMA person. The only thing I know about Tito Ortiz is just his rep as kind of a, controversial trash talker and everything like that. And as much as, I'm sure Wai, like you and John are sick to death of all of these articles sort of talking about, oh, did you know that Donald Trump has a background in pro wrestling, and here's how he's maybe applied some of those lessons to entering into politics. He's shown that sort of formula can work, and whatever that says about the world, I don't know, but it's maybe disappointing, but you can't really say it's surprising at this point.
So for the latest in combat sports news and headlines, postwrestling.com, Andrew Thompson and John Pollock, always hard at work on that website. Looking at our schedule coming up, John and I will reunite on Friday for Rewind-A SmackDown exclusively for Post Wrestling Cafe patrons. So will we have an election result by then? Who knows? But we look forward to not just talking to each other, but talking to all of you. That show is live, as always, for patrons on Zoom. So if you sign up to the Post Wrestling Cafe, you get a Zoom link Friday afternoon, and you can join us live for that one. Saturday, we've got a lot to cover here because it's New Japan Pro Wrestling's Power Struggle show. John will be handling that show with WH Park. That'll be another exclusive for all Cafe members. It'll be Tetsuya Naito versus Evil. And if that match is anything like their previous two, you can expect a hell of a podcast from John Pollock and WH Park. I know you're a New Japan fan, Bruce. Any expectations for that?
I mean, for Naito and Evil, no. At this point, the expectations are so reduced. I don't know if you saw that post-match presser in which Naito actually apologized for the fact that the match was going to be happening again. So, I mean,
yeah.
They have to, or at least some of the wrestlers obviously know that a goodly portion of their fan base is really pretty burnt out on the dynamic that they just keep going to the well with here, especially after, so close after the G1 when we just saw the generic boilerplate Evil Dick Togo match so many times. Thankfully there's a lot of stuff on the undercard that is, that is exciting. I think, Ibushi White is going to be great. I always have time for Suzuki and Shingo mixing it up. Mm-hmm. I mean, I really enjoyed their match at King of Pro Wrestling. So, those two things, really propping it up for me there, and the rest of it looks good too.
Yeah, we got Kenta Tanahashi for the briefcase, and then for the U.S. title briefcase, and I believe we also have Zack Sabre Jr. versus Toriano for a King of Pro Wrestling, in a King of Pro Wrestling match. So
Yeah, no corner pads, if I'm remembering correctly.
No corner pads. Damn, that should be the headliner. But WH and John will have a review for all cafe patrons on Saturday afternoon, and in the evening, it's AEW Full Gear. I will be joined by the BDE for our Full Gear post show, and we're gonna do something very special. Forget the Raw Nitro simulcast. Forget Impact and Raw from January 4th, 2010 going head to head. I will be doing I will be on the BDE's YouTube channel. We will be live streaming AEW Full Gear, that post show at youtube.com/upnext, and the audio as usual will be available afterwards on the post wrestling feed. So there are multiple ways to catch us, but if you want to watch the show, post show live right after Full Gear, you can join us at youtube.com/upnext. That'll be free and available to everybody. Join the chat room, because the chat room is always fire. We move on now. We have, as always, on Wednesdays here, Bruce, I know you're a very happy patron of the Post Wrestling Cafe, and I don't think you've ever won one of these, but you have a chance to give out a t-shirt right now to a very lucky patron of the Post Wrestling Cafe. Can you pick a number between 1 and 1912?
1 and 1912.
Any number.
242. 242.
Any significance to that?
There is. There's a musical significance to that, which I'll maybe mention at the end when I'm doing my plugs there.
Oh, okay. Look forward to that. Well, congratulations, 242. You are Jamie Harrison from Barnsley, Yorkshire, Great Britain. There's I get confused with all these English names. English
counties, you have shires, and then half the time it's just the name of an estate rather than a street address. Yeah, I have a lot of British relatives, and it's very confusing.
So Jamie Harrison of Barnsley, Yorkshire, congratulations. You won a t-shirt courtesy of Bruce Lord and the Post Wrestling Cafe. So I will be messaging you there. As always, postwrestlingcafe.com, that's where you go to support everything that we do here at Post Wrestling, as well as earn yourself some bonus podcasts and maybe even a chance at a free t-shirt once a week. So there we go. Let's head over now to AEW Dynamite. This is the go-home show ahead of Full Gear. Bruce, you watch AEW every single week. What sort of are your what's your excitement level, at least heading several days out from Full Gear?
I mean, it's pretty sharp. There were a few things that I was looking for heading into this episode in particular. I kind of jotted some thoughts down, specifically looking at this, as a go-home show. I think that some of, maybe about half of the Full Gear card was looking in really, really good shape heading into this show. I think definitely the Kingston Moxley feud. I mean, that's just been kind of lightning in a bottle in terms of just latching on to the chemistry and the history that those two had, and what was, a fill-in match when Archer was out for a week there, now seems, I think, are like the hottest card match on the whole card. And I've also been really impressed with the kind of the slow build of the Kenny Omega and Adam Page feud. But I was, kind of keeping an eye out for how they were going to deal with the Cody and Darby match, because there really hadn't been much with that. Heading into that, I was curious to see how the whole MJF, Wardlow, Jericho Inner Circle dynamic was going to progress. And, I was just kind of curious as to how this whole Miro best friends thing was going to be progressing, cut off, or whatever it might be. So kind of good, mixed to good heading in there, but they had some work to do, I thought, going into this show.
For me, on paper, I thought this was already a really strong card the moment they announced it last week, and all these matches were put in together, and it just felt like one after the other was something I was really looking forward to. Between like them announcing, I mean, FTR and the Bucks alone, I think would have been a headliner, but then they also announced Page versus Omega. John Moxley versus Eddie Kingston, which is a match that I didn't really see like stepping up to this level, being this hot. And then, the promise of what is expected to be sort of a final deletion type of match between Matt Hardy and Sammy Guevara. All of these things pique my interest, but you're absolutely right. Like the build for some of these matches is something to leave something to be desired. So we shall see how they do in this episode of Dynamite. And we start off, Dasha is in the back with Jericho, Jake Hager, and Santana. These are the 3 Inner Circle members who are not competing tonight, but Jericho nonetheless is going to be doing commentary. So Dasha talks to all 3 of them. Jericho puts over Jake Hager for beating his opponent in Bellator this past week, saying he's 3-0, he's undefeated. Did not mention the particulars of the fight, which I believe John mentioned he was a very much closer decision than I think we probably expected. It
was a split decision, I believe, wasn't it, that John said?
I believe so, yes. So no mention of that, but nonetheless, he is 3-0. He is undefeated in Jericho's eyes, and he puts him over as just this badass. MJF and Wardlow interrupt. MJF is glad that Jericho's going to be on commentary tonight because it means he's going to get a front row seat for his match. Jericho says that there's something missing from MJF. He looks at Jake Hager and his 2 black eyes, calls him a badass, looks at Santana and says, this guy's crazy, and says MJF is missing that killer instinct he looks for in his Inner Circle members. And in fact, he calls him a little soft. MJF says, soft? Just watch. How do you like Chris Jericho on commentary?
I'm a big fan of Jericho on commentary. I know that some people have said like that, he's just a little bit extra in his presentation, and I can see that, but I think he does a really good job of, kind of doing what I think we all agree commentary should do, which is work to communicate, the stories that are being told in the ring, and working to communicate the seriousness, the authenticity, the dangerousness, whatever it is, of the folks that he's whose matches he's calling, right? Like, yeah, there's the odd little bit here and there, just dunking on Shivani and, kind of a little bit of, kind of inside baseball with Excalibur from time to time. But on the whole, that intensity is generally directed towards the in-ring product. And I think, that's a real boon for them. I've been really interested, as a tangent here, about how AEW has been using Dark as an opportunity to sort of like test out and give some of the talent reps behind the desk, Starks in particular there. So yeah, I think the fact that they've been willing to be flexible with who's behind the desk there, has served them well. And certainly when you got a talker like Jericho, it hits more than it misses.
It like they've really kind of like allowed Jericho. I mean, AEW has been such a playground for him to be able to just be completely creatively fulfilled in so many ways. But, these are ways that you can get value out of Chris Jericho outside of him having to take bumps in the ring every single week. And just simply having him on commentary throughout a show, they built that into, I would say, and it's not going to be a big draw. Like, people aren't necessarily tuning in on a Wednesday just to hear Chris Jericho on commentary. But I think it's a really, it's an attraction that they can advertise.
Oh yeah, and it does. It's it gives you an opportunity to have the whole like Judas pop at the beginning of the episode and everything like that, and kind of it's an extra little bit of kind of hype to start the beginning of the show. The way that when JR was kind of a special guest on calling the Undertaker matches or whatever, and you get the Boomer Sooner music and everything, and you get a little bit of kind of extra weight or intensity to the commentary presentation there. So yeah.
So we get our first match. It's Sammy Guevara and Ortiz taking on MJF and Wardlow. And the story, of course, here is that Sammy and Ortiz are the 2 members of the Inner Circle who really don't want MJF in there. So MJF and Wardlow spend the first portion of this match working entirely over Ortiz. We get a hot tag to Sammy as he delivers a number of dives. I found, and I'm sure, this was completely the intent, but Sammy Guevara was working as a total babyface here in this heel versus heel match, to the point where like the crowd is cheering pretty loudly for Guevara. So that was certainly a takeaway. MJF comes off the ropes with a stomp into Ortiz's arm as he continues working over Ortiz's arm as he sets up that Fujiwara armbar. Tower of Doom spot with Wardlow that ends up powerbombing all three off of the top rope. Wardlow delivers an F10 to Ortiz, but Sammy breaks it up with a big splash. Sammy continues delivering just, very babyface friendly, spectacular offense, hitting a springboard 450 onto MJF on the floor. He poses outside of the ring and he gives the finger to a guy in a Serpentico mask, and who we thought was Serpentico actually ends up being Matt Hardy, who throws a chair at Sammy Guevara, taking him out for the rest of the match. Back in the ring, MJF applies the Salt of the Earth Fujiwara armbar to Ortiz, making him tap for the win. What do you think of the match, Bruce?
I thought the match was pretty decent. I exactly agree with you that, given that, the whole thrust of this program has been, MJF as the snake in the grass, as, the person who's even sleazier and skeezier than Jericho is, and that Jericho is the kind of the de facto babyface there, with Sammy standing in opposition to MJF, and not only in terms of character, but in terms of work, right? MJF is working this completely bone dry, slow, neck and arm hold, style there. And then, I don't know if you noticed the real, yay boo when he and Wardlow were cycling in and out there, right? The crowd was hot for Wardlow as well. So you kind of had this weird dynamic in which you had two baby faces and at least one heel, and I don't know how Ortiz fits into this dynamic across the ring from one another. Then when you factor in the whole Matt Hardy thing, that was sort of something that I noticed kind of set the tone for the whole rest of the show, in that just about every match involved not just the feud that was in play there, but because there would be second parties involved, then you'd have somebody else who has beef with them running in. So it was this constant attempt to keep kind of all of the plates spinning and kind of reminding you that each of these people have stories with multiple people. That Sammy, fine, has this current distrust of MJF, but he also has Hardy to deal with in the short term there as well. Once again, great showcase for Sammy, and I think Wardlow's power spots came across really well as well.
I thought it was a really fun and entertaining opener, and you're right. This show was absolutely a go-home show in that every segment seemed to remind you of the match that was coming up on Saturday for these guys. But what I found, again, very most notable about this match was how hard Sammy was working as a babyface. Yeah. It was, to me, such a drastic change that I thought it was almost a form of misdirection to make you think that the guy might be turning and he might be leaving the inner circle. Because I feel like they could have done this match without Sammy having to do all the 450s and all the crazy dives and playing to the crowd. You didn't need... You certainly, there's an argument to be made that somebody had to be a babyface in this heel versus heel match, but I think they went even more over the top with Sammy. And I can't think that was just, just something that they did for this particular match. So it's a tease. I think they'll continue beyond this pay-per-view coming up. And I definitely feel like Sammy and MJF is a feud that probably is just starting.
Yeah, a lot of moving parts in the whole, MJF and Inner Circle business. So keen to see where it goes.
After the match, MJF walks up the ramp and charges Jericho at the announce desk, sending him through a backdrop. And Jericho emerges with a smile on his face, presumably in approval of his opponent's proven mean streak.
Yeah, that Jericho was watching all of those Suzuki matches, the Suzuki Ibushi match in particular there, right? Not even caring if you get beat up, but just wanting to see that fire in the eyes of your opponent there.
Smiling after you've been attacked is definitely the sign of some sort of I don't know, psychosis that makes you really scared of the guy. We go backstage to a pre-tape segment with, actually not even backstage, we go to somebody's house as Tony Schiavone sits down with Kenny Omega. Kenny admits that this is not his home. He is simply relocated to Jacksonville because he's here to focus on this tournament. Kenny is asked by Tony about opponents switching on him at last minute in this tournament. Of course, he had Joey Janela change up on him, and then he had Rey Fenix change up on him last minute. He says with AEW being touted as such a sports-based product, he could have easily went to Tony Khan to ask for a bye throughout the rounds, but he didn't. He says he expected to face Wardlow in the finals, but it turns out it's his former partner Hangman Page. Kenny, continuing in a very cocky tone, says, asked Tony Schiavone who he would pick as the favorite to win this tournament, given his tournament experience. And Tony Schiavone reluctantly says Kenny. And Kenny says he's destined to be the next AEW champion. So Kenny Omega continuing a very cocky, as as his fans might say, cleaner personality in this segment.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really, really here for that. I really like this smarmy, passive-aggressive direction that he's going in. I mean, that match with Sonny Kiss and just everything about the presentation, him hyping the crowd up and then just, being such a prick to Sonny afterwards was just wonderful. I mean, I'll say this. I think my musical tastes probably overlap with 1WH Parks pretty closely, but in terms of Kenny Omega, I'm the exact opposite. I love cleaner Omega. Full stop. No complaints. Cleaner 2.0, rinse, repeat. I'm totally here for it.
Can you tell me, this type of heel persona, it's to is it to make you think that the guy is going heel, or is it strictly that type of badass heel that badass babyface meant to appeal to fans?
No, I think it's meant to be a pretty straight up heel persona that is tapping into this kind of the larger meta story that we've been seeing on Being the Elite and whatnot, right? In that you have Kenny being sick of being reminded of, oh well, you haven't really had a match quite as good as your Okada matches and everything like that. Being irritated by being reminded of, the former glories and possible dream matches, that he gave up to, that he sacrificed to come to help form AEW with. And so now you have him being willing to sort of, maybe possibly leave his friends in the dust, in order to actually regain that intensity, that kind of, borderline crazy eyes psycho intensity that he had as the cleaner, and regain the prestige that he had internationally a couple of years ago. So I think that's the kind of the story underlying this kind of readjusted or revamped heel Kenny.
Our next match is Miro taking on Trent. It is Miro's first singles match in AEW, and if I have to remind everybody, this is a feud over a video game cabinet. They show a clip from Excalibur's podcast where Trent taunted Miro for being... Well, I say this is a feud over a video game cabinet, but they do also have a bit more meat to the story here, because, yes, a clip from Excalibur's podcast where Trent taunts Miro for being a young boy while they were both in FCW. So throwing a bit of real-life history ahead of this match, and in my opinion, something that I'm able to maybe get into a little bit more than destruction of a video game.
That 5 seconds of a YouTube video, a Skype, a Zoom meeting, or whatever it was, I didn't see the full context. I only just saw that 5-second clip. That 5-second clip did more to make me care about Miro and AEW than literally anything, the sum total of everything that he has done since arriving here, right? He has history with this guy, and he feels that he was disrespected when he was younger, and now that he's this giant, destructive beast who's a big free agent signing, he's going to get some payback on anybody that feels kind of stepped on him on his way up. I care so much more about that than trying to shoehorn in this just absolutely ridiculous video game gimmick.
And I think we've seen AEW really philosophically it differs from I think how WWE tends to treat perhaps the history between their characters, where AEW will really go out of their way to mention things like FCW in order to help you suspend your disbelief, to know that exactly what they're talking about is genuine and is true. The stuff that's going on with Eddie Kingston and Jon Moxley, I have that much more, I think, tendency to believe that Jon Moxley actually sat down at the same table as Eddie Kingston's mother to make a promise like that, because I think historically they have shown that much more faithfulness to authenticity, whereas WWE will allude to history between their characters, for instance Drew McIntyre and Keith Lee, but without stating exactly where these two would have been together, because I guess they don't think Evolve is big enough to mention, or any other promotion is big enough to mention. It feels more made up to me, even though it very well isn't. So I continue to admire that.
They've shown such a tendency, like especially with Excalibur behind the desk, right? You have an encyclopedia of all of these, indie and Japanese promotions where these guys may or may not have mixed it up, in the past. Him reminding you that, oh yeah, Kenny Omega and Chuck Taylor used to be a tag team. All of that is right there for you to pick up on if you want to do it. And not to get ahead of ourselves in terms of the Kingston and Moxley thing, but at least like that's a feud where I understand that it's personal, but it is also very clearly connected to the championship, right? Wanting to sort of accomplish great things, in AEW and make something of yourself. Like, a lot's been said about the Miro thing. I don't have a problem with, with wrestlers wanting to integrate aspects of their own lives, their own personality, their own hobbies into their on-screen presentation. Like when that's done well, kind of calling back to these moments of authenticity that we're talking about here, or when it's something like Darby and skateboarding, right? It's like, okay, that gives me a sense of who this person is. But Darby Allin isn't fighting Cody because, I don't know, Cody set fire to his half pipe or something like that, right? Like, I understand that there's a larger principle at stake.
Skateboarding isn't his defining trait. It is just an accessory to whatever the character is. He's not, Darby Allin pro skater. Like, he's just the guy who happens to come down onto the ramp with a skateboard and always has a skateboard with him. Miro is being positioned because this is all we know about him. He is a Twitch streamer. He is the guy who loves video games and gets so obsessed with video games that, the destruction of this really nerdy, like hardcore limited edition gaming controller is enough to warrant this rivalry. And I really hope that this clip that they showed from the podcast is them kind of coming to their senses with Miro and realizing that this video game by itself, this stuff is not really enough.
Yeah, I think that, and again, not to get ahead of you here, but I think that and the actual in-ring presentation of Miro did signal a little bit that we're starting to change direction.
So we go to the match, and much of this match is really just Trent trying to beat this monster that they've now introduced in Miro. Miro, I felt, was much more wrestling like, his Bulgarian Brute character rather than perhaps even his Rusev Day character towards the end of his run. Just this dominant monster. He stops a Trent tornado DDT early on with a belly to back suplex, just continues to control him with his slower pace brawling offense. On the floor, we have Chuck driving Kip Sabian out of the arena. Trent again goes for that tornado DDT, but this time Miro tosses him even further, which sends us to commercial. During the picture-in-picture, we have Penelope Ford on the floor, slapping Orange Cassidy's glasses off. So Orange Cassidy steals Penelope's glasses. He's about to put his hands in his pockets, but out from the back come the Dark Order to attack him from behind. And this includes John Silver, who had a big role on tonight's episode. He, of course, is facing Orange Cassidy in a match that has now been upgraded from the buy-in to the main card as a result of the addition of the women's NWA championship match. So John Silver here was delivering a big knee to Orange Cassidy, and he is ultimately chased to the back by Miro as well. Back from the break, Trent continues to struggle against Miro. Trent, again, for the third time, goes for that tornado DDT and finally hits it. Lands his running knee, gets two. Trent goes for a springboard, but slips and falls off as Rusev capitalizes on the slip-up with a big kick, and then game over, which is his accolade for the submission victory. Before we talking about the match, what did you think about the supposed botch? Do you think it was intentional, or do you think it was a real botch?
I didn't, I was watching live on the TSN website there, so I didn't have a chance to click back and rewind it, and I wasn't sure what Twitter was saying there. It looked accidental to me, and if that's the case, I think they did a wonderful job of recovering, and Miro, as opposed to that kind of botched game over from a couple of weeks ago, I thought Miro did a really good job of using that to lead into the finish there. If that was intentional, then bully for Trent because that looked really good.
It seemed intentional to me, and I mean, number one, because it played so perfectly into the finish, and it just makes sense in terms of story. A guy goes for a high risk move. slips and falls and ends up costing him the victory. In a way, it kind of protects Trent, even though it kind of makes him look stupid. But it seemed intentional to me. But I mean, these are professionals, of course, so I wouldn't be surprised to hear it the other way around. What did you think of the match?
I thought it was overall pretty decent. I mean, I think finally we got, I mean, even just down to the gear that he was wearing, Miro finally seemed like the absolutely, gigantic, overly muscled, destructive force that you would hope that he would have been positioned as right from the get-go, right? I mean, I know we keep harping on about this, but what was it in April when there was the wave of releases there, and and people were talking about like, oh my God, him as a surprise entrant in the G1 if he could clear quarantine and everything like that. I mean, the look is something that, if presented correctly, I think really gets over by itself. And, if we're kind of being honest with ourselves, the fact that the average size of performers, there are exceptions, of course, but, AEW doesn't favor absolutely gigantic swole guys quite as much as the WWE does. So, Miro's going to look very, very impressive in comparison to a lot of the AEW roster. And I think that's more or less what this match did. It maybe if that's the purpose of it, is to sort of reestablish him as a real beast, it maybe went a little bit long and Trent maybe got a little bit much, but, he spent a lot of that bumping and, as you're saying, kind of going for these high-risk maneuvers that didn't always pay off. So maybe comes out in the wash.
I definitely enjoyed seeing Miro being booked like a big man again. As you mentioned, he's got a huge size advantage over much of the roster in AEW, and I think it's especially important to book him that way. And here he looked incredibly dominant. He should have been booked this way from the start. His character, I think, should have much more reflected, somebody like this rather than somebody who streams on Twitch. Of course, you could look however you look and stream on Twitch, but I mean, first and foremost, like, you want to push this guy as a monster. And I thought Trent also worked really well here as the underdog babyface against a giant. So I enjoyed the match. Not necessarily one I would even say you have to go back and rewatch, but if you want to get a sense of maybe how Miro is being treated, and if you're a big fan of Trent and want to see a good Trent match, you might want to check this out.
Yeah.
After the match, they all brawl outside, but here comes Orange Cassidy delivering an orange drop to both Miro and Sabian. And this feud between Miro and Sabian and the Best Friends seems to continue now, along with Orange Cassidy. They kept cutting cameras back and forth between Orange Cassidy and Miro, so perhaps you could expect that as those two as future opponents.
Sure. I mean, as long as it doesn't involve video games, I'm fine with it.
Jim Ross is with Adam Page, Hangman Page here, in another sit-down interview from pre-recorded. Hangman Page is holding a cocktail. He's sprawled out on the couch. JR asks how he and Kenny being former tag partners will play into his strategy on Saturday. Page says he knows all of Kenny's moves and knows how to reverse them. And I feel like JR is one of the few interviewers who can get away with this, but he calls Hangman Page out on his bullshitting. He says Page is nervous, and that's why he's on his third or fourth whiskey today. And Hangman admits that he is. He says Saturday will be the closest he's been to the AEW title since challenging for it against Chris Jericho over a year ago, and that if he loses, he doesn't know what he'll do. So Page continuing to play, I guess, his very kind of unsure, unconfident self. How do you think he did here in this segment?
Yeah, the anxious millennial cowboy, as the T-shirt says there. I have really enjoyed the way that condition, or that mentality, is something that Page has been conveying a little bit more subtly than it was in this segment, whether that's been on BTE or, in the Little Dark segments, or on Dynamite itself. I think you're right that JR was the right person, and maybe the only person, to be able to kind of make the subtext text and sort of say you're drinking because you're anxious and you're nervous about who you are, and the fear of, losing to Kenny here. This is a touchy thing because I know and I understand why a lot of people don't like it when issues, when angles involving substance abuse get used in pro wrestling. And to be frank, there's not a good track record with those. But I do feel like this is a slightly more realistic and not quite as insulting or demeaning characterization of alcohol abuse than we have seen in the past. Giving a psychological reason as to why someone might resort to problem drinking rather than just, he's a drunk. That's a fine line to walk, but I think they're doing it here.
Have they actually portrayed him as like a drunk, like a real like sloppy drunk who just like doesn't know what he's doing? Have they done that?
Not in the ring. Certainly not in the ring. And I think that's kind of the like he's kind of like he's looked like he's had a couple of beers when he's come out to give somebody an assist a couple of times, right? And that's, I think you can get away with that. I do not, and certainly not, definitely not this Saturday. And I imagine they wouldn't be so foolish as to do this. I do not ever want to see, oh no, he's, messed up and he shouldn't be in the ring under the influence. And that's not just because of, again, the crappy track record of, the Hawk storyline, the Scott Hall storyline, but also because of, to be frank, the very unfortunate history of that being an actual real thing, right? Of people actually being under the influence and getting into a ring and working when they shouldn't. So I think as long as they don't kind of cross that particular line or touch that third rail there, I think using this sort of, here is a way in which a person is dealing with career stress, personal stress, in a way that isn't helpful and isn't constructive. Like, I feel that's a more responsible form of storytelling than we generally get when, kind of booze enters the pro wrestling picture.
I would definitely like agree with that, but I feel like for the most part he's just kind of been portrayed as a guy like not with any sort of like issues with, I think, substance abuse, but more so just a guy who really likes to drink, like like Julian from Trailer Park Boys. He just
I mean, the Bucks did call him out on it. There was a couple of like pretty serious BTE segments where like the Bucks called him out on it, like slapped some drinks out of his hand and everything like that because he didn't, that was after kind of he turned on them and pulled them out of the ring in the FTR match. They were sort of blaming that on alcohol, I think, behind the scenes there.
But I would say like this particular segment was like, at least in my recent recollection, like one of the ones where JR strictly points out, hey, you're drinking a lot for a reason. And Paige kind of played that up. So it's interesting. It's interesting. I can't really say like this program between Kenny and Paige has been like, it's a match that I'm excited about on paper. I'm excited about in ring. But like, as far as like the story goes, they've had a long time with it, but it's not at a level of, say, for instance, MJF and Chris Jericho, or like Jon Moxley and Eddie Kingston. And I just don't know like what it is about it. Maybe it's just like maybe sort of like the characters being too subtle, maybe a little too inconsistent and undefined for me. Yeah. But that might work for a lot of other people. Maybe that subtlety is what they want.
It's weird. It's working for me in this case. It's not working for me in the case of the Bucks, right? And it's one of these ones where you sort of have to take the whole weird, strange kind of, multiverse, cosmos of everything that's been happening on BT going back, a couple of years, in some cases here to sort of get the full picture. And yeah, people are going to have different mileage with that depending on the degree to which, BT is a priority for them, or the degree to which they feel that the motivations are being communicated clearly on Dynamite.
Speaking of the Bucks, we have a Bucks versus FTR video package. This really built up to me the dream match aspect of the feud. And we have Excalibur speaking here, talking about how the Bucks were considered the best tag team in the world until FTR came along. We have Daniels and Kaz saying they are the two best tag teams that they've ever faced. We have also speaking roles from Arn Anderson, Billy Gunn, Taz, Tully Blanchard, and Matt Hardy, all chiming in with their predictions. And the Bucks also restate the stipulation here that if they lose this match, they will never challenge for the belt again. What'd you think of the video?
In principle, I liked it. I do wish that it was something that had maybe that this was a direction that they had gone in earlier, because I feel as though, they're sort of kind of, checking the wind, which way the wind's blowing with this, and sort of saying, okay, we kind of have to get back to basics and just turn this into the match that people were talking about on the internet before AEW even existed, right? When it was just a twinkle in everybody's eye, and we had, however many months of just, FTR drops and everything like that, on BTE there. So, I mean, I think the thinking here and the purpose of this segment is good in that it's it's a dream match and it's a styles clash as well, right? The young flippy-doo indie guys, which of course we know isn't really accurate, versus the modern day double A Tully types and everything. So I think in principle it's a good adjustment to make, but the question is whether it's too little, too late.
Team Taz comes out. Taz, just quickly as he walks out, reminds Will Hobbs of his deadline to join the group. I don't know how long this deadline is. I thought it was like last week, but I guess it just, he
going on dark forever. Yeah.
He's allowed extensions. Taz says he's not here to talk about Will Hobbs. He says he is here to talk about having to wait 3 hours to talk to Tony Khan before he was told to leave because Tony Khan was too busy dealing with matches for the pay-per-view. So Taz brings up the AEW ranking system, says Brian Cage is, in his opinion, undefeated because that Moxley match didn't count. He also says that Brian Cage is currently ranked number 1, says Ricky Starks nearly won all of his matches, and the man's not even ranked. And he says that is horse shit. Ricky Starks grabs the mic, he speaks, he can't figure out why he's not ranked, and he can't figure out why they don't have a match at Full Gear. So Taz sets its sights on Cody and Darby Allin. Says the office gives them everything they want. He says Cody likes to say, do the work. Well, unfortunately, Team Taz is getting worked and threatens that Team Taz will have a presence during the pay-per-view on Sunday. I thought a really good promo from Team Taz. I thought Taz, as always, sounded great, as do Ricky Starks and Brian Cage just standing there as a presence saying his catchphrase. To me, like, this is like one of my favorite factions, like low-key in AEW.
Yeah. They're not like up at the top of the card or anything like that right now, but they're doing everything they absolutely need to right now. Starks looked like $1 million in that outfit, by the way. I don't know how to describe it all. He had those crazy like patent leather loafers and kind of like a tight turtleneck that almost sort of reminded me of that, like, that famous viral picture of The Rock with the fanny pack. And I think
he is like on. Skinny, like The Rock, circa like 98.
Yeah. And he's, I wouldn't quite put him in the same stratosphere, but he's pretty damn handy with the stick here. In addition to the actual, the quality of it, I like the fact that this segment was honing in on the fact that, look, being on the pay-per-view, being in marquee or championship matches matters to the roster, matters to the wrestlers, and they get pissed when they feel as though they are being overlooked, right? The fact that, and then it's kind of clever the way that, Taz always does such a good line of kind of riding the work shoot sort of thing with his language and everything like that. But then the fact that he's specifically going after Cody, right? Obviously as, oh, well, you're the TNT champion and, my guy should be getting a shot against you, but also obviously pointing to the fact that, oh, Cody's booking and it's his fault that, none of my guys are in primo spots here, right? So I love the way that like Taz just works in those little levels of kind of, meta smart stuff into all of his mic work.
Does it perhaps telegraph the finish of the Darby Allin Cody match on Saturday?
It might too, but they also have serious beef with Darby as well. So we might be heading to another tag match or something. I don't know.
Up next, we got Private Party taking on the Young Bucks, and they bring up how this match was a rematch made after they discovered that a member of Private Party's shoulder was up in the finish of their last match. Is that right?
I didn't even catch that part of it. I just thought I just heard that this was the last minute sub in for the Scorpio Spears match. I didn't know that there was a kayfabe explanation for it.
Ultimately that was the reason, but I guess they might have brought up this other reason for the match here. But Matt Hardy, of course. Who do we have here? Matt Jackson is working, of course, with an ankle injury caused by FTR's attack several weeks back. And as Matt Hardy enters with Private Party, Sammy Guevara returns the favor, attacking him from the back. The both of them are taken to the back. The Bucks dominate most of this match. They're working their usual style, but after a double pescado, Matt Jackson starts to favor that ankle, and the ankle just keeps getting worse and worse as the match progresses. He's selling it off of every move, including his own offense, as the Bucks continue, for the most part, to dominate Private Party. We had a hot tag to Isaiah Cassidy. He hits a great-looking tornillo, taking out both of the Bucks, and they then blows this big, nasty, wet kiss to the camera. Matt is... It looked disgusting, especially now.
Spittle on it and everything. Like, I know it was accidental, but just not a good look during a pandemic.
Matt is really clutching onto his ankle while he's on the apron here. And at this point, Private Party hit Gin and Juice. Matt breaks it up with one leg. The Bucks go for the Meltzer driver, but Mark Quinn escapes it. Quinn catches Matt's foot, but Nick comes in, saving him with a super kick. The Bucks hit the BTE trigger, and they get the win. What'd you think of the match?
I thought this was really good. Just probably, the kind of the bell-to-bell highlight of the whole night for me. I like the callback to the first match that they had. I believe it was the second episode of Dynamite, where you had kind of the surprise roll-up there, and then we had, I think it was Cassidy and Matt, I can't remember, kind of doing these reversing roll-ups, kind of calling back to that there. I mean, obviously, I think the Bucks Private Party dynamic is one that, it's one of the things that they chose to launch Dynamite with, and I think it's one that they're going to continue to come back to at different times. Private Party are a fair bit smoother than they were a year or so ago. They're not necessarily yet the well-oiled machine you're going to want your tag champs to be, but I think they're on their way. And I liked sort of the kind of the subtle story here of, yeah, and they've said this, right? That, the Hardys see a younger version of them, the Jacksons see a younger version of themselves in Private Party, but, the Bucks aren't as young as they used to be, right? They're broken down. They've got, a bum leg and everything. Private Party are younger, faster. Their cardio is better. And the Bucks have to be kind of just a little bit more cagey, a little bit more grimy and smarter after, Private Party upset them last year. So I like that as a story guiding this match, although that maybe sort of flies in the face of the whole kind of difference between FTR and the Bucks in terms of, FTR being, the wily old schoolers there and the Bucks being the young high flyers. So maybe a bit of crosswires there, but for the purposes of this match, I thought it was a really, really fun and entertaining dynamic.
I think you could be an old schooler and you can also be an old high flyer, which is what maybe I think you were alluding to with the Bucks here, sort of being the veterans. And, we see like in the, at least like Cody kind of like has a similar story with him and like somebody like Darby Allin, somebody who's like a big brother to his little brother. John Moxley and Darby Allin is a similar story as well. But like I kind of see that with the Bucks and Private Party where they will probably continue to have matches upon matches for years to come, and ultimately someday you're going to have Private Party just take over and really continue to beat the Young Bucks because it'll be their time, but it's not that right now. And also, of course, this match very notable for Matt selling of his ankle as a major injury heading into Saturday's match, which big fan of Matt Jackson selling. Like the Bucks, I think I've always enjoyed, but like the moment they start integrating some of that like body part psychology in there, it just really, for me, takes it to another level. So I'm expecting this match to be really good on Saturday.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, actual in-ring bell-to-bell, I think it should be great, even if, I think a lot of people have misgivings about the way that it has been presented and this sort of quasi-heel turn from the Bucks that they just completely moved away from in this episode. Yeah. There was no mention of, them super kicking Tony or throwing money in Tony Khan's face. No mention of any of that on this episode, I don't think. I
mean, they kind of started drifting away from it last week, didn't they? When they talked about how it was like done out of, I don't know, some sort of frustration. Like they really, the entire elite.
Sometimes good people do bad things, I think was the line. Yeah.
Right. So FTR attacks the Bucks from behind. They hit the Goodnight Express to Matt. And then again, they threaten by clamping the chair onto his ankle again. Cash Wheeler, that's his name, right? Dax Harwood and Cash Wheeler. I still have to get used to it. Cash Wheeler is about to stomp on it. They wait a very long time, I have to say, before Hangman Page comes out with his drink, chasing them away just simply at the vision of him. And he's followed by Kenny Omega as well, who comes out and chases FTR away. The entire Elite minus Cody are sitting in the ring. Omega and Page share a look. They're fist bumping each other. And for a brief moment, it appears that the Elite are united one more time. Did you take this as perhaps, a reunion that will last with the Elite beyond Saturday?
No, I think we're going straight into kind of, I think they're pulling away from the Bucks doing the heel thing, and so I think we're going like straight ahead with a pretty emphatic win for Omega, and then him just kind of leaving the Elite behind in order to go after Moxley afterwards. I think that's a really logical and kind of long-lasting, long-building story that they've kind of had on the back burner there for a while. But I love the fact that you can always make these callbacks, right? And I think this is something that I imagine everybody involved kind of saw how, an entity like New Japan could do these sorts of things, certainly with, obviously, the Omega Ibushi dynamic, right? And how just two people accidentally being in the ring at the same time or whatever it might be, not even with anything being said, can sort of lay the seeds for something else down the road, for better or for worse. I also like the fact that, it was a subtle thing here, but you had Paige running out, theoretically quickly for the save, and then it was Omega who was a little bit late, and that's the exact opposite of what was happening, I think, just kind of as we were heading into like lockdown and everything back in like February and March, when, if the Bucks were in trouble or Omega was in trouble, Hangman was always late, to make the save and everything like that. And here it was like, Kenny, who was, maybe kind of working on his core or something like that, and, wasn't able to get off the couch in time to help his buds as fast as he might have.
Do you think this ends the rivalry between Paige and the Bucks?
Between Paige and the Bucks? Again, this is something that I think has been kind of... They've been a bit too clever for their own good in terms of how they've tried to thread that needle, all of the weird stuff with, like, I don't understand why FTR are the entity that we're sort of playing head games when they're supposed to be the old-time bruisers and not kind of, the modern, the more modern psychological masters. So that, I think they're kind of pulling away from that. And yeah, I think after we have, again, if we're kind of looking towards a defeated Paige and possibly a defeated Bucks, after Saturday, then you'll have those three kind of like, regrouping and maybe licking their wounds together.
We go to our face-to-face with Jon Moxley and Eddie Kingston up next, and the moment Jon Moxley steps into the ring, Eddie Kingston tells Tony Schiavone to leave. He grabs the mic and immediately cuts into this very, very intense promo right up in Jon Moxley's face. He says, "Saturday, I'm going to take that title from you, and I'm going to take it to my mom, and I'm going to say, this is the reason you don't have a grandchild. This is the reason why you don't have a daughter-in-law. It's because of this." He says he had to sell out. He had to become everything he hated. And he says it's too late for him, John. John, you ain't saving nobody. And I'm taking that championship from you. Moxley says he doesn't have many friends. He's been burned and burned again. But he didn't think it would be by Eddie. He says he was happy when Eddie Kingston signed with AEW. He was happy for him. He was happy for his mother, Ruthie. The mention of Ruthie definitely incited Eddie Kingston, who just continued to react in just the most animated, aggressive way against Jon Moxley in this promo. Moxley goes on to describe saying grace with Eddie and his mother at the dinner table, where he also made a promise to Ruthie that he would look after Eddie. But Moxley says he's going to break that promise. Mox says the loudest person in the room is usually the weakest, so Eddie, being very loud lately, he thinks that there's something wrong with him. He thinks deep down in his heart, he knows that he's going to be in the ring with the best wrestler in the world, and he's going to lose on Saturday. And he says that's a scary thought that after 18 years, maybe he didn't deserve this after all. And Mox says the worst part of this is that Eddie made a promise to his mother that he won't be able to keep. Kingston just is completely livid at this point. He says, off mic, you better get ready to kill me. This is real, as he storms out of the ring, because I believe there's a rule that says he can't attack Moxley before the match. So Mox ends the segment by saying, on Saturday, you're going to realize that you're not the man who you thought you were, and you're going to say, I quit. Intensity was just very high from the get-go here for this segment. It was crazy. And especially from Eddie Kingston, like this run continues to feel like, something that he's not taking for granted whatsoever. It feels like much of his words feel incredibly genuine, because, the man you can buy, has waited 18 years for a moment like this.
Oh, this was fantastic. This is, you're obviously not going to get something like this, in an entity like New Japan Pro Wrestling that I love with all my heart. But this is what I want, in North American pro wrestling in terms of setting up a match here. I had goosebumps throughout the entirety of this. I thought it was wonderful. I did some quick informal polling of some friends after last week's episode of Dynamite, just to sort of take the temperature of, hey, which matches are you most excited about? And by far and away, Kingston and Moxley was the most popular there. This was maybe my most anticipated match going into the weekend, and then this just dumped a whole bunch of extra hot sauce on it. This is great. I love the whole kind of not even morally conflicted, someone who knows he is doing something wrong and is unable to change or repent, and even though he knows, he's kind of damning himself by going down this sort of road, right? We kind of got a hint of that, as I think you and John were talking about last week, with kind of Eddie, going through the rosary beads in the video last week there. And then, this just brought it into some, super heavy duty, New York gangster stuff about, blood oaths made to mothers and everything like that. Just absolutely fantastic. I love the fact that, again, to what I was saying a few minutes ago there, although this has become a really serious personal blood feud, the title is still central to it, because the title is what, Kingston has kind of mortgaged his future and sacrificed, the prospect of having a normal life in order to achieve, right? And we understand that this is ultimately the thing that is driving him to give up everything and to, give up his own soul, and admitting as much to Moxley there. Also, as a kind of a technical camera person their way, I really dug the blocking of this. There's that point where Kingston turns away from Moxley as he's talking him, as though he knows, look, if I look in his face, I'm going to punch him, and then I don't get the match. So I can't even look at this guy while this is happening. So you have the camera kind of looking over Kingston's shoulder at Mox in the background there. Just great stuff here. Wonderful.
It was very good theater, absolutely, all the way down to, just the man's visuals. These two, I think, we've seen throughout their interactions with one another, have fantastic chemistry. They're both excellent storytellers, especially in the case of Eddie Kingston, who I think has just been, who would have thought, honestly, at the beginning of this year that the man would be headlining, looks like, an AEW pay-per-view. And according to many, not just your friends, but, amongst maybe, a lot of us, maybe me too, being in the most anticipated matchup of that card, trumping, Hangman Page versus Kenny Omega, FTR versus the Bucks. So it's and we're talking about a match that isn't even a first time. We just saw this match on TV, yet in a few short weeks they managed to create this very intense personal backstory that has just increased my interest, even though this is the second time. So
yeah, I'm really glad they've had the faith in both of them to kind of realize that there's more storytelling to be done here. There's more money to be made here, and they've decided to go with it. It's especially cool when you think of the fact that, from what I've heard, from interviews and everything, Kingston was legitimately planning on kind of just ramping down and effectively kind of, low-key retiring, 2 or 3 years ago. And then again, I think, kind of Power as an entity kind of reminded people, oh, right, this guy's an incredible talker. And then, obviously being able to step in there, replacing the Archer match. It's a really nice series of, serendipity or coincidence here that this is where we are now.
he was good on Power, but like this is the form for him.
Yeah.
You know, he's way better here. I mean, obviously working against a guy like Jon Moxley in a principal title picture role, but also just being able to, I think, like Power was cool, but it had that kind of almost like comic-y 80s vibe to it that almost like made it hard for him to cut a serious promo like this. Whereas AEW, I think, is modern. It allows him to like tell perhaps like more deeper personal stories. So anyway, great on him. Up next, we have Pac. An update from Pac, who we haven't heard from in quite some time since the beginning of this pandemic. So we see a video from Pac. He's sitting on a couch at home, and all of a sudden, around the couch appears Full Gear packs popping up all around him. Normal Pac says, the funny thing about isolation is that you've got nobody to play with. He says it's been 7 months. He's been a casualty of this world, but he's been here before. Every day that passes, he gets stronger and better. So, and that's really it. Like a cool looking, video, I guess showing that even though Pac isn't quite in the arena just yet, it seems like his return is imminent, and he says as every day passes, he's getting stronger and better.
Yeah, I was a little bit confused as to what the larger messaging here was. I kind of had mixed feelings about those solo Pac vignettes that we got, I think, again, either just before or just after lockdown started, where there's kind of that weird, almost like Jack the Ripper vibe of him like lurking in these like seedy alleyways on like cobblestone and everything like that. I like the look of him in this vignette here, just like standing on this kind of like desolate seaside, this kind of gray, grimy shore, selling this idea that he's alone and he's kind of going stir crazy. But I was kind of unclear as to what he was specifically angry about or who he was calling out. The idea was that he was watching, episodes of Dynamite, and they kept playing audio of Kingston saying, "Where's your British friend?" To the Lucha Brothers. So it's like, okay, is he coming back to get back at the Lucha Bros or Kingston for sort of moving on without him? Maybe, but it felt a little bit aimless.
I don't think there was necessarily a specific target. I mean, if there's anybody you could perhaps look at Kingston or the Lucha Bros as, I think, like, logical people he would have to answer to and talk about. But I just kind of felt this was more just of a teaser to remind you who this guy was and that he is coming back. And it seems like a return would be imminent. Where do you think he fits in? Do you think it would be as a heel or babyface?
I mean, you're obviously going to get, something of a hero's welcome for anybody who's been away this long, and for, somebody who was, doing pretty well for themselves at the time that the lockdown happened. So I really think, he's a versatile enough performer, and we've seen him work with, I think, a wide enough range of people, not just in AEW, but in, those runs that he was doing in, Dragon Gate in the UK and everything, after leaving WWE, that you can kind of slot him in wherever you want, I think. Like, I kind of almost feel like not committing, maybe I'm being a bit too critical here, maybe just not stating a direction for him, and then seeing when he is able to come, okay, who needs a dance partner at this particular time, and how could we fit him in there? I think he's versatile enough that I could see him going either way.
I think Pac is like, I think he's going to be way better as a heel, especially coming in. I'm also trying to think now, if he is going to get paired with perhaps somebody like Kingston or even like the Lucha Bros, I'm thinking what the next steps are for Eddie Kingston, because I don't think he's going to beat Jon Moxley for the title. And if he's not going to continue that way, of course you can have him continue to manage like this stable, maybe challenge, Cody for the TNT belt. But with the way he's been portraying his character being as sympathetic as it is, I definitely see a babyface turn in Eddie Kingston's future. And if that's the case, is that a logical turn or a logical next step for Pac? To pair him against the babyface Eddie Kingston, maybe even throw in the Lucha Bros either as babyfaces, siding with Kingston against Pac, or maybe just Rey Fenix.
Yeah, no, I think that would be absolutely logical. I mean, I think, yourself and John and a lot of other people have sort of said, man, having Phoenix just sort of kind of play a heel on TV kind of seems like a weird use of one of the most natural, just in-ring baby faces that you have on the planet right now. So yeah, so anything that could sort of reshuffle and reorder things there would be fine. Yeah, I think, if we have like a completely broken, humiliated, and empty Kingston having lost on Saturday, then sort of, having Pac come in as this sort of, avenging demon or whatever, wanting back at the person who, broke up his group or something like that. Yeah, you could kind of shuffle the deck a little bit there.
Alex Marvez is with the Natural Nightmares in the back. They're about to cut a promo on the Butcher and the Blade, who they're going to face next week. But in walks Ali, who tells QT Marshall that his credit cards are maxed out. And this leads to a sneak attack from Butcher and the Blade, which leads to next week's match. In ring, we have Red Velvet with Brandy taking on Nyla Rose with Vicky Guerrero. Red Velvet is 2-9 in AEW, much of almost exclusively, I think, from Dark. And she's currently a tag partner of Brandy's, who's acting as a bit of a mentor for her in her corner. So Red Velvet rushes Nyla Rose from the get-go, but Nyla quickly takes control. Velvet attempts a diving Rana, but Rose catches and delivers a spitting powerbomb. Rather than covering her, she pulls Red Velvet up and instead hits Hikaru Shida's finisher, the Tamashi, which is her running knee, with Shida watching ringside. And Nyla Rose gets the very quick win. So afterwards, Vicky Guerrero takes the microphone and Velvet comes out with Brandy as Vicky cuts a promo on Brandy, who says rather than the CBO, the Chief Brand Officer, Brandy should be known as the CBSO, the Chief Bullshit Officer.
Inspired.
Vicky then turns her attention to Hikaru Shida, who says Vicky takes credit for making Shida accept Nyla Rose's challenge last week, and tells her to enjoy her last days as champion, sumimasen, and they brawl. So, your thoughts on this feud? We haven't really had much time with it. I mean, other than the challenge last week and then this segment this week. What are your thoughts?
I think it's fine as sort of a fallback here. It does sort of put Shida in the position of sort of being kind of like a reactive champion, in that she's sort of said, oh, I want competition or whatever, but it's really just been like this kind of parade of people kind of one after one sort of saying, hey, me next, and her kind of going, oh, okay, fine. And that's kind of it, right? I'm not saying that we need to have like some sort of, really out there extravagant character for Shida. Like I've really enjoyed her in-ring work, and I think that can certainly stand for itself. I think
we don't need extravagance, but I think we need some relatability of her character, and we just simply haven't had that. Like even something as simple as like, I'm here trying to prove that I am the best. I don't think we've been able to convey really anything about her other than the fact that she holds this belt.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we've seen, in plenty of other cases that even if you do want to do like a more kind of casual, in-person, subtitled, interview, like, on the couch with, with JR or something like that. Like, this is an audience that is absolutely willing to go along with something like that, right? So, yeah, a little bit more backstory about her motivations and, what AEW or what, success here, in this difficult time means. Something just, a little bit of something like that. A lot's been said, and I think we were talking a bit about it off the top, about, the AEW women's division and the question of sort of, oh, well, should we be, do they need more TV time, or is it kind of the lack of depth in the roster? You see them trying, as we were talking about off the top, really trying to flesh out that roster as much as possible and as quickly as possible. I know that there was a lot of talk about how there was going to be a push for Abaddon before she got injured. So I've just been assuming that she was meant to be kind of the new monster on the block that was going to be put up against Cheetah until that injury.
We get a really awkward transition to this next segment, which is a Kenny Omega Hangman Page video package. The announcers seem really confused, unfortunately. Impact's Don Callis actually appears in this as a Kenny Omega expert, so he just gives his thought on the match. And then we get this like really cheesy video montage set to Don't Know What You Got Till It's Gone by 80s glam metal band Cinderella. I have to say, like, you know, in terms of technique and style, this was not one of the better video packages I've seen from AEW. And I don't know if that was intentional because of the cheesiness of the 80s theme. I suppose it did its job of like reminding you of like some of the history between these two, but what did you think of it?
I mean, the tone of it was a little bit off considering, you know, the relative seriousness of both men's arcs heading into this feud. That said, I have to admit, I cracked a smile when I realized it was Cinderella that I was getting to hear in the year of our Lord 2020 on network television. I'll minor little note here. Well, Callis, you know, if you remember, he turned on Kenny at that like indie show in Winnipeg like a couple of years ago, and so I don't know why he's imagining he can get back on the Omega bandwagon at this point. But anyway, yeah, I mean, I feel as though, again, to kind of, you know, call back to the ways in which I feel they're playing around with some of the same tools that was done, you know, with the Golden Lovers storyline. I feel as though they're trying to sort of kind of play around with some of that same dynamic, right? This sense of betrayal and this sort of, oh, you know, I need to move on and be free. And it's like, oh, yes, fine, I understand that. But I also sort of, you know, the kind of all of the unspoken emotions that lie beneath, you know, the breakup of obviously a romantic couple or a tag team in this case, right? I mean, that's obviously the dynamic that, you know, the Golden Lovers sort of entirely relied upon. Not necessarily as, you know, directly a homoerotic connotation in this case, but trying to tap into that same sort of well of, you know, kind of almost like melodramatic sentimentality over the possibility of this, you know, supposedly beloved tag team having to part ways at the crossroads.
I think my standard for 80s music montages is just like that much higher now after reviewing Rocky IV. So maybe enough. I was especially hard on this one, but yes, Rocky IV review, everybody. It's up on the Pro Wrestling Cafe. It was a lot of fun to review with John and John's childhood friend Ed Boxler talking about that particular film. It is incredibly fun, and if you're looking for a distraction while still maybe considering, you know, a bit of Americana from the 80s, I highly recommend a rewatch of that film anytime. Next week on Dynamite, we have, of course, Butcher and the Blade taking on the Natural Nightmares, as well Penta versus Phoenix, a rematch from their title eliminator first rounder. So doing that one again. We go up next to a Darby Allin video, and again, it's black and white, so it's super artistic. We see a beat up painted car with the words "Face of TNT" written on it. Darby takes a skateboard to smash the window of this car. He gets into the car as we see a man in a suit wearing a Cody mask, and Darby proceeds to run this man over as we see the guy take a Sammy Guevara bump for this car, and that's the end. I mean, usually it's Darby Allin like taking all the damage in these videos. This was his poor friend dressed up as Cody Rhodes, but nonetheless, you know, like the jackass stunt that he did with Steve-O, I think is really apropos because these are essentially just jackass stunts except black and white.
Yeah, and therefore artsy, and therefore, you know, dark and moody and emo and everything like that. I mean, you know, like all of the other Darby segments, you know, it obviously comes from him, and that's good, and that's fine. But I guess my issue here was that this was, I mean, you know, this match got announced, I don't know, 2-3 weeks ago when, you know, Darby just kind of walked out, I believe, after the Orange Cassidy match, and okay, fine, that's it.
I believe he had already earned... Wait, did he by that time earn... Yeah, he had earned the title shot somehow.
Oh, okay.
And he was set to face the winner of that match.
Okay. I guess my point is that they weren't really doing much with the Cody Darby. How long ago was the Orange Cassidy? Was that just last week? The Orange Cassidy Cody match?
God, it was last week or the week before.
I guess, you know, it's a short turnaround time, but I guess my point is that, like, I didn't really get a sense of what was driving, no pun intended, you know, Darby in this segment and what his relationship with Cody was meant to be portrayed as here. Like, I mean, we got that at the end. We'll get to that. But up until this point, it's like there'd been no mention of I don't think on air of the Fyter Fest match at that point. I think at some point earlier this year, they did run-ins to save one another. So it really did it felt like this was something that had to be constructed on really, really short notice. And I wasn't really clear as to what sort of conflict or dynamic was being expressed, at least at this point.
So Orange Cassidy Cody was last week, so that might kind of have to explain some of the lack of the rush job that they might have to do. But secondly, I thought it was pretty apparent, the story that they're trying to tell of Cody really had to spell it out here at the end, But other than that, it's Darby struggling with whatever the idea of being the face of TNT was. He did a similar video last week where. Was it the jackass stunt where he fell off the half pipe?
He rolled down the half pipe, yeah.
And didn't the body bag say face of TNT or something? Something to the effect. He alluded to the idea of being the face of TNT earlier, but we didn't really have somebody spell it out until Cody at this very last segment here. It's maybe another one you kind of have to chalk up to a lack of time to really flesh out story wise, but I think there was an attempt at some deeper meaning here. We go to our main event, and it's the Dark Order, the team of John Silver, 10, and Colt Cabana taking on Cody and the Gun Club, Billy and Austin Gunn. What did you think of this as the main event of this show?
I was really shocked by it when I realized, I can't remember if it was announced as such at the beginning of this show, but when the, however many matches were announced, last week on Dynamite and then, last week on Dynamite and last night on Dark, I assumed this would be happening, I don't know, sometime after kind of the first hour bump, in kind of your fifth or sixth quarter hour or something like that. I certainly did not see this as a main event match. If I'm remembering correct, I think they acknowledged the fact that, neither Billy nor Austin have had a match on Dynamite yet. And then all of a sudden they're tagging with Cody because apparently, according to Shivani, Cody trusts Billy Gunn. So, okay. All right.
I think this will be the first time the Gun Club has had a match. I believe Billy's probably appeared before, I think. But this was the Gun Club making their Dynamite debut, and they actually inform us that they are 9-0 as a team, which I suppose that stat alone might warrant something. But they also inform us that Cody has now welcomed the Gun Club into the Nightmare family. So, whatever that means, I guess.
A lot of factions going on.
Yeah, I guess they'll be coming in to save QT Marshall. Where were they, actually, when they were getting beaten up earlier? John Silver by far is the biggest personality in this ring. He is constantly just taunting and posing against Cody, so they're very much pushing this guy as perhaps the face of the Dark Order, even more so than Brody Lee at this point. Austin Gunn here, of course, was also getting a lot of ring time. He was doing all the babyface selling during the picture-in-picture, and got quite a bit of offense in as well. We come back from commercial. He hot tags to his dad, Billy Gunn, who looks, again, much like Miro, like Billy Gunn, what some would consider a bit of an average size guy in the WWE during his time. He looks like a giant in an AEW ring. He hits the Famouser on 10, but Silver breaks that up. 10 hits his ripcord cutter onto Gunn for 2. Cody tosses Silver into the crowd. And Austin, I guess a sign of being a part of the Nightmare family, he now uses the Crossroads and then hits his finisher known as the Quick Draw, pinning 10 for the victory. So, I think that at least shows you maybe some of the idea of why they put an unknown team like the Gun Club into the main event, because you end the show here with Austin Gunn, a complete unknown, getting a victory on an episode of AEW Dynamite. So it seemed to me a real concerted effort to promote him to end the show. What did you think of the match?
There were a lot of moving parts. I don't know that it was super fluid, especially given sort of the range of kind of modes or styles that a lot of these guys are working. But before I go on to say anything, I want to say I've been a big John Silver fan. I've liked him since he started showing up in PWG 5 years ago. I think that he's a perfect example of how you can use being the elite to sort of explore new stories and build character without completely disrupting the continuity of Dynamite. But this is theoretically the main event of your go-home show before one of your 4 pay-per-views. And there's a lot of comedy going on in here. As you're saying, you have somebody that I imagine 90% of the audience is possibly not aware of in Austin Gunn pinning, just another one of the kind of the Dark Order putty patrol effectively in here to theoretically end the wrestling segment of your go-home show. In John's news update this week, he was talking about a presser that Tony Khan did, and he quoted Don as saying that 4 times per year, Dynamite is centered around building the pay-per-view, and the other 48 of the weeks are about solid in-ring action. So, okay, fine. I don't know if that was him getting ahead of the fact that, we don't have a massive main event here, but did this match itself get me super excited for either Cody, Darby, or, Silver Cassidy? It didn't really move the needle in that sense.
I always appreciate like AEW doing bold moves, like, featuring a complete unknown in a main event and then giving that guy a win. I just don't think that time should be the go home show for one of your pay-per-views. So I'm in agreement there. As far as like an in-ring performance, I think Austin Gunn looked capable, looked like he fit in there. Wasn't necessarily anything that impressive. Honestly, like seemed, at least to me, just like another guy. But I've yet to see what his promo would be like, what type of story he might be telling with Cody here. It seems almost like too on the nose for him to just simply be a protege. He seems to me just somebody who would be a natural heel, much in the way of like, like sort of an MJF Cody protege, storyline who might eventually turn on him. But anyway, we're getting too ahead of ourselves. And this is what I mean. You have all these possibilities between, a new guy and being introduced into Cody's faction. But I just don't think this week is the right week to put that focus onto him, because we're going to forget about it by the time we finish recapping this show. So I'm kind of with you there. As Cody grabs the microphone.
Sorry, if I can interject, minor point here. As just a quick little aside, as somebody who I know has memories of, the 1992 Blue Jays World Series, did you notice how much the Gun Club theme is basically a dead ringer for the controversial, like, Atlanta Braves Tomahawk Chop song?
I did not pay that close attention.
Keep an ear open.
Oh, okay. Okay. Interesting. I wonder if there's any significance, or if it's probably, they're not from Atlanta, are they? Like, there's probably a coincidence, right?
Could be. I mean, I can't remember where their music writer is from, but anyway, just as somebody who has that drilled into my head, it just immediately stuck out to me. But anyway, sorry.
So after the match, John Silver is stalking all the baby faces from behind, but Orange Cassidy comes in and stops him with the orange punch, again, reminding us of their match taking place on Saturday. Cody grabs the microphone. He looks to Darby Allin sitting in the rafters and says Darby doesn't think TNT wants him as the face of the network. Cody says that's not true. He says that the circumstances were different. Cody would want him to be the face of this network. He personally recruited him to AEW. But he again calls the TNT title the Ace Belt and says that the problem, Darby, is that you are not the ace. So a very quick little promo from Cody. I thought quite effective and maybe perhaps much needed, to really drive home this feud. I mean, in my opinion, I think this is a program that's been hot enough, or at least like two characters that are hot enough that on paper I'm looking forward to the match anyway. But perhaps they could have used a bit more time to really sell like the face of TNT idea.
Yeah, I think that giving Cody, I don't know whether it might be on Dark and getting a little bit of it replayed as one of the vignettes here or something like that to kind of get this out, because it felt like he was like really up against the clock here. Like, I think it was like 90 seconds left or something. And there was a lot of beats that he obviously was trying to hit there. There was the truth that I speak contradicts the lies that a lot of people live. And I'm like, I have no idea who you're referring to at this particular moment here. I mean, I'm interested. I'm excited for the match. The general idea of, Darby maybe, kind of wallowing in a bit of self-pity and viewing himself as more of an outsider than he actually is. And, he just needs to step up and grab the brass ring. Sure, fine. That's, I can accept that as a storyline there, but I don't know that this kind of convoluted and dog's breakfast sort of a match was the right way to sort of hang, to kind of hang or set up that side of this match coming up on Saturday.
We should also mention that there's going to be a countdown to Full Gear where you'll get some fleshing out of some of these stories. In particular, Jon Moxley versus Eddie Kingston. They did preview as saying the countdown will kind of reveal a lot more about their personal history. So that's definitely a segment I'll be looking forward to if I have time to catch it. I don't know if like something like Cody versus Darby Allin is going to be high caliber enough for them to spend that time on it. But your thoughts on this go home show?
It did check off a lot of the things that I was looking for in it. It did, even if a couple of the builds felt sort of rushed. I do think that we at least have a better sense of the motivations heading into this. Again, I can't overstate just how hot of a match and a feud Kingston Moxley now feels. I absolutely would have put that in the main event spot there. I think that that whole segment would have been an incredible last image, revolving around your main title as well. Would have been great there. So even if a couple of these matches don't necessarily feel quite as hot as they might be, as you were saying at the top of the show their way, on paper, this is a really, really stacked card, and I do expect the actual, bell-to-bell to be really, really good this Saturday. A few of those things feel a little bit, more intense and real and grounded than they did before. A couple of them, not so much.
Yeah, I mean, for me, this was a card I was already quite excited by, and I think, in terms of story, what did they flesh out anything? Did they improve my anticipation for anything? And I'll say Jon Moxley and Eddie Kingston, the championship match that matters, absolutely yes. I think they did a great job with that. Cody, Darby Allin, yeah, a little bit. You know what? Before let's just get right into the preview. You want to do that?
Sure, yeah.
So Saturday we've got AEW Full Gear, and starting us off on the buy-in is for the NWA World Women's Championship. We have Serena Deeb versus Allysin Kay. We briefly talked about this earlier, but your expectations for this match and the outcome.
I've been really impressed. I mean, I have to admit, I haven't seen much of Deeb's work previous to her AEW appearances here, but she's looked, I think, really, really good thus far. I was one of those people who really enjoyed that first Thunder Rosa match that she had on Dynamite a few weeks ago. So again, kind of like we were saying at the top here, I do feel as though the NWA women's division and the AEW women's division, it's kind of sort of a marriage of convenience, due to COVID right now. But it does sort of, I think, if nothing else, it really kind of steps up, obviously, the amount and quality of women's wrestling on AEW right now, and that's not a bad thing. Again, ideally, would it be on the kickoff? Maybe not, but it should be. I'm looking forward to it. It should be a good match.
I think, Deeb continues to impress, and I imagine this will, be her continuing to, establish a lengthy reign with this NWA World Women's Championship. I mean, really, for Allysin Kay, this is going to be her tryout for AEW, and I'm not even, not even necessarily AEW. This is going to be her tryout for the wrestling world, and we've seen, with other performers like Ben Carter, an appearance on a national stage like AEW will certainly improve your stock in the eyes of several companies. So for her, I'm looking forward to this being perhaps the best, performance she's had in years, if not maybe her entire career. So it's a big match for her, but I do expect Serena Deeb to retain. We also have on the actual card now, Orange Cassidy versus John Silver in a singles match.
In theory, I think Silver is somebody who can maybe, kind of stimulate or kick off a fresher side of, Cassidy's more comedy-heavy side of things, which he's kind of which he kept very much out of the ring in that Cody match, right? Which I think was the right call. This is a different match. This is a different opponent. This is a time, I think, for a bunch of kind of grab ass tomfoolery and everything. And like I said, it isn't just the comic character. I really enjoy Silver's in-ring work, and I'm just super stoked that he's been able to kind of work his way onto the actual card of a big pay-per-view here.
You're right that this is definitely the time for maybe more of a traditional comedy-based Orange Cassidy style of match. And to me, like, the outcome should only really go one way. You've invested so much thus far in Orange Cassidy. Part of the reason why I feel like this match has even taken place is just simply to get his presence on the show, because you don't really have another, beefy feud for Orange Cassidy at the moment. So I see this being as a showcase match. I mean, John Silver, he's the type of character who should lose, quite frankly, for all of his matches. Doesn't lose a thing as far as, appeal. So probably that'll be the outcome. Jericho versus MJF. If MJF wins, he is allowed to join the Inner Circle. To me, this is like one of the more like well built up matches throughout the entire cycle thus far. It's a match that I didn't really think we were going to get for this pay-per-view. Yeah. I didn't think we were going to get to for several pay-per-views later, but they're starting off essentially the program with it to kick off what has to be a further story down the road. So what do you see for this one?
Yeah, it's interesting that they've kind of, if you want to say put the cart before the horse here or whatever. I was kind of surprised by it, but I do like the stipulation, and I do think that the stipulation will really help to drive forward, like you're saying, now a pretty long-running and deep feud here. Obviously, I understand that people have lots of different opinions about something like the Dinner Debonair, and that's fine. But I do think that the actual just, chemistry between these two is something that you want to ride for as long as possible. I also think that it's, Jericho's an interesting opponent just in the ring for MJF, as he kind of, is continuing to, try to, I think, kind of work obviously on, and he is improving in his kind of in-ring work as well as the actual, character stuff. So I see MJF winning here. I see ultimately MJF not only being initially begrudgingly accepted into the Inner Circle, but maybe bit by bit beginning to sort of assert more dominance and control over it. And, if we were talking about characters like Wardlow, characters like Sammy, the possibility of a face run for Jericho, I think once you have MJF kind of in this kind of seat of power there, you can start doing a lot of interesting things with the members of the Inner Circle. So I'm putting my money on MJF on this one.
Like, starting off a feud with, like, arguably the biggest match you can make in this program, I mean, is one of those kind of bold AEW moves that I imagine I would have a lot of faith in them being able to do it now, and then doing this exact same match several months later, but the circumstances being completely different, the roles being completely different. So I look forward to seeing, like, this first chapter, essentially in, like, this story, what promises to be, I guess, a bit more of a storied rivalry between these two. And maybe leading to a Chris Jericho face turn. So I also go with MJF. I look forward to seeing how he integrates with the Inner Circle proper. Hikaru Shida taking on Nyla Rose for the AEW Women's World Championship. We kind of already, shared some thoughts, but do you see a title change for this one?
I mean, I could. It's not beyond the realm of possibility. I mean, obviously Rose is, kind of, at least on appearances and kind of, in-ring dominance and everything, the sort of, the de facto sort of person that you expect the title to just kind of return to every now and again. I think it really depends on what they want to do with some of these other, women, like, Allysin Kay and, oh geez, I feel bad, I forget her name, the Russian shooter woman. The new people that are being brought in here. Do you want to continue to have Shida kind of having competitive matches with them? And I think that there's maybe a little bit more value in the short term there of doing that, rather than having Rose, kind of, dominate and continue to defeat a burgeoning women's division. So I think Shida makes a bit more sense if you want to start showcasing a wider range of talent in the women's division.
Yeah, the idea that this was, by the way, I think Layla Hirsch, was that who you're looking for?
Yeah.
I don't know if she's signed. I believe she might not be at the moment, but nonetheless, like, maybe somebody that they're looking to bring in. But you mentioned earlier how perhaps Abaddon might have had some part in this, and that leads me to believe, could they have put the title on Abaddon? I mean, maybe I shouldn't even think that way. The thing is, it's like, clearly they are having limitations with trying to tell some stories with Hikaru Shida. Meanwhile, with Nyla Rose, you have somebody who can cut a promo on her own now. She's proven that ability. And she also has Vicky Guerrero. And, Nyla Rose, she did have a run, but at the same time, it's like, I don't really think they went as far as they could have with her being as champion. The question to ask is if they feel like Shida is better chasing. If Shida's kind of run at the top might be over. I think it's a very real possibility. But I'm also thinking like where they can jump to after this, and it's like really hard for me to think.
Britt's got to be the next one back in line. I think at this point.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So I mean, it's probably going to be Shida if it's a heel, Britt Baker. The Elite Deletion match between Matt Hardy and Sammy Guevara. We're expecting this one to be a cinematic match. What are you expecting from it?
I don't know what I'm expecting. I'm just hoping that, I don't know, they're putting themselves in a weird position going back to this match. So shortly after everything that happened at All Out there. I mean, really all I'm hoping for here is that they do not point towards or tease or play around, especially if it's a cinematic match, that they don't try to do some sort of kind of like worked injury sort of thing so shortly after that. Obviously, Matt's really scary fall there before. It's not a match that I was especially hankering for, but, you maybe sort of get the sense that it's one that, one or both parties really feel as though they want to kind of do right and see through to completion in a way that they obviously weren't able to before. I think that, being the younger person, being the person who is probably going to be involved in some pretty serious inner circle stuff, I do think this favors Sammy Guevara.
I think this will be the match that'll hopefully like wipe away some of the bitter taste coming off of their prior matches or prior match and past interactions. With this being a cinematic match, I think they could be a lot more safer with it and really kind of emphasize like some of the great things I think we enjoy about modern day Matt Hardy, and that's just character and just ridiculousness in using those characters. I think they've been holding off on the broken character up until now, perhaps for a certain reason, and I think we get the return of broken Matt Hardy in this match. And as long as they do some like funny kind of like wink wink callbacks to previous Matt Hardy things, or even things involving Sammy Guevara, I guess they have to be really careful with that because Sammy's recent history isn't all that pretty.
Geez, yeah. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, but I mean, I look forward to this. I think it'll be a nice break in the middle of this like 9-match in-ring card, quite frankly. So that's the other thing. Like, do you think these pay-per-views are getting too long? And how long do you think this one will go?
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at this one on paper, and you've got like at least 3 matches that you have to think are going minimum of 20 minutes in, Page Omega, Moxley Kingston, and FTR Bucks, right? I do not see any of those going below 20 minutes, and Jericho and MJF could get a lot of time as well. And I think it was kind of universally thought that the previous one did go too long and did suffer from a couple. I mean, I think this is a better card on paper, but
there's a real danger that this will have the same effect. I mean, you're absolutely right. A lot of these matches I think are like, I think if we've seen like AEW give a lot of like free reign to its talent to like have the type of wrestling matches that they want, and sometimes that really comes to the detriment of the overall show. So I really hope that they learn from their lesson, because even something like this Elite Deletion itself, it's going to be a segment that'll be at least like maybe 7 minutes at least, maybe more. So some of these other matches I hope they go short, and I hope they learn their lessons. Let's go to Hangman Page versus Kenny Omega for the AEW World Championship Eliminator Tournament Finals. God, that's a mouthful. What do you think about this one as far as a winner and a loser?
I mean, I think it's got to be Omega. I think we are absolutely, pulling the V trigger on the massive acceleration of Omega as a single star. I mean, again, as a big Omega fan, I've been perfectly happy with the, he's headlined a lot of pay-per-views. The tag run, I think, has been really excellent. But I think once you have him as the champion, you really, really shake up the main event picture in AEW. And again, I think a defeated Page coming out of this is an interesting presence as well, and kind of in the broader BTE cosmos.
Agreed with you. Kenny Omega for this one. Cody versus Darby Allin for the AEW TNT Championship. Do we get a title change?
I want to say no. I mean, just because it's moved around a lot lately. I don't have a really strong feel on this one because it's such a late addition there. I could maybe see this being used as a jump-off point to like kind of getting Team Taz involved, and maybe we get some tag stuff out of that. So maybe we get a bit of a screwy finish and it stays with Cody.
This is a really interesting one. This one might be kind of tougher to predict amongst all the matches on this one because I think Cody, it makes sense why he would hold the belt. Like he's going to be on that reality TV show all over TNT. He's going to be sort of a lead player and he's just such a great guy to hold that title because you can have so many different types of opponents, babyface or heel, go up against him. Darby Allin, on the other hand, is a lot more difficult because the guy isn't really promo, or at least isn't really known for his promos, might not be as versatile of a wrestler to go up against several different types of wrestlers. But at the same time, like, how many times can, he's another one who, like, how many times can you job him out to somebody like Cody, or at least like, not come up short when it comes to like, these big matches. Nonetheless, like I think they've been known to like tell these kind of long form stories with guys like a Darby Allin or a Jungle Boy, and therefore I think Cody will probably retain. FTR taking on the Young Bucks. This is for the AEW World Tag Team Championships, and if the Bucks lose, they will never challenge for the World Tag Team Championships again.
I'm going FTR on this one. I think the stipulation is an interesting one, and I think you could sort of say, oh well, the first time was with Cody was to prove that they're serious, and now that's to put the seed of doubt in our heads. But I think that if they wanted in the first place to kind of go with this sort of more tormented or darker version of the Bucks, them feeling bitter about kind of the company and the division, obviously that was so important to them, kind of passing them by and kind of slipping out of their fingers forever in this company where the point is that tag team wrestling can be the main event. I think that's an interesting storytelling device. FTR's run hasn't been exactly lights out until this point, but I think there is potential there.
Last week I definitely I think I said that I feel like the Bucks wouldn't announce a stipulation like this for no reason, and therefore I thought that they were actually going to lose so that they can tell whatever story they want to tell without ever having to challenge the World Tag Team Championship again. But now I think about it, there's no way. There's no way through, because I know that they stick to these stipulations. It's one thing for Cody to never challenge for the World Championship again, because if you're going to, create the TNT Championship, that he can still fall back on that. There's really nothing that the Bucks can do if they don't challenge for the World Championship. And they're too big of a name for you to be able to headline with, to not be able to put them in this position. So I think it's a form of misdirection because maybe they respect the audience, knows that they might stick to the stipulation. Mm-hmm. That I think that they'll probably just win. And that's my prediction right now. Finally, we have Jon Moxley versus Eddie Kingston, an I Quit match for the AEW World Championship. What do you expect from this match, I guess, in terms of style, perhaps, and also outcome?
I mean, I expect that we're going to get a lot. I mean, it's going to be just, brawl heavy. That's kind of a combination of brawling and some, kind of close up submission stuff has been what we've been seeing from Kingston thus far. And obviously that's something, so that's something that Moxley is obviously interested in, as we can see in Bloodsport and everything like that. So I think it's that sort of style that you're going to get there. I don't know to the degree to which we're going to get a bunch of crazy CZW deathmatch type stuff or anything like that. But I want blood, sweat, and tears in this one. I think it's a fait accompli, of course, that Moxley is retaining here. But as long as this one hits those really, really intense, personal beats and moments that their interaction on this episode did, it's going to be a home run.
We might look at this period of October and November as maybe a peak in the I Quit match type. we just had one in Jey Uso and Roman Reigns that I think, to most people, depending on your taste, I think really enjoyed the storytelling aspects of it. I feel like this will be that. with two, of course, incredibly capable, like, in-ring storytellers, but also with the addition of, I would say, maybe more in-ring action, maybe more varied in-ring action, as you alluded to, with, like, more of a Moxley kind of shoot style, Kingston maybe more of a brawling hardcore style. Blood is definitely a given for a match like this, and as a result, I think it'll probably close the show. And, like you said, like, the storytelling aspects, the getting deep into, like, the history, and, like, now bringing up, like, promising to the man's mother that he has to do this. Like, Eddie Kingston has to do this for his mom. And conversely, Jon Moxley promised also to Eddie Kingston's mother that he would protect him. And protecting Eddie Kingston means beating him out of this, like, mental haze that he's in. So it's all for Ruthie, this match, and I'm really excited for it. It's my most anticipated match of the show.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, end result, what do you think?
It's got to be Moxley here, and Eddie, appears, is probably going to be in tears, I think, after having to say I quit. But then it's possible that we might jump right into that sort of, that pack possibility there, or something else to do with the Lucha Bros right out of that. So even if this is it in terms of Kingston being involved, like, right up at the top of the card, I do think that there are so many cool new storytelling opportunities that you can do once so much of this guy's personality, intensity, and skill on the mic has been shown to so many people. He's not going to just fade into the background after this.
Yeah, one is seeing whether or not he'll turn babyface afterwards. I think is also another really, like, interesting possibility, because I mean, with the type of, like, he's just so good. Like, if you had more audience there, no doubt he'd be somebody who'd be really cheered. So you can go either way with him. But yep. I really enjoyed his addition. Okay, we're running a little bit long here, so let's take a little bit of feedback from the Post Wrestling Forum here. First of all, what did you guys think of this edition of AEW Dynamite? Out of 10, you guys thought this show was an 8.29. So very good rating for this edition of Dynamite. And if you want to join me, Bruce, here, I just have the thread pulled up, and I start here with Andrew Bates, who says, I liked a lot of the promos here, including the build for Hangman and Kenny and Mox and Kingston, but it's still frustrating to me the way women's wrestling is pigeonholed in the show to a single match, always in the same part of the program. Like they're ticking a box on the format sheet and then moving on to what they're actually interested in. They had to do a whole cycle of work in one segment to build Shida and Rose because they rarely featured the challenger, and they couldn't spare a single video to explain who Allysin Kay is. It's AEW's biggest weakness, and it's hard to understand how they could fix it when they can only offer a sliver of time per show. Andrew from St. John. I do, like, in this case, wonder what they were up against when, putting together something like Shida versus Rose, like, as you had alluded to. I don't know if that would have been their first choice, if Abaddon might have had a bigger role. But even then, that might not be so much of an excuse, because, like, we could just look at Hikaru Shida herself and how little they've done with her as a character. So I think those criticisms are still very valid. In Allysin Kay's case, that's something I don't know if they would have had the foresight to, because she only announced her free agency like a couple days ago. Like, I don't know how early they might have booked that one to be able to, like, gather footage. But then again, I mean, they have Billy Corgan on speed dial, and they could probably whip something together pretty quickly too.
Hopefully on the countdown special, that's something we can see there.
Yeah. Do you want to take the next one?
Sure. Yeah. Moving on, we have Crooked Letter 9, who says, easily the best part of the Go Home Dynamite was the literally face-to-face promo between Jon Moxley and Eddie Kingston. The emotion melted off the screen as it felt like two friends who'd had an awful falling out. It's by far the most must-see match on this Saturday's PPV. Social distancing be damned. The last push to Full Gear capped off with the main event with Cody challenging Darby Allin to have his shot at his TNT title. The sit-down promos with Omega and Hangman were also standouts, and a brief moment of unity against FDR could be a sign of things to come. Solid stuff all around, with the exception as to how it's handling women's wrestling. So, yeah, a common sentiment here.
All right, we got a one from Vaughn, who says, this show tonight was a pretty standard go-home show from AEW. Everything was done in order to get you ready to purchase the pay-per-view on Saturday. Probably one of the weaker editions of Dynamite in terms of match quality, but the promos were unbelievable. Seeing the Pac video was great, the Kenny Hangman sit-down interviews were great, and the Taz promo was excellent, and that segment with Mox and Eddie was just fantastic. I know it's a long shot, but I would just be so happy if Kingston won the title on Saturday.
a bit of a reach there. Like I said, a bit of a long shot, but
it's possible. They could do anything, but yeah.
And if you're paying money in that hope, then the show has done its job, definitely. Raymond in Sacramento, that sure felt like the best go-home show of the Dynamite pandemic era. I fully expected to be distracted by the ongoing undecided presidential election, but my attention was able to remain focused on Dynamite. The show built the matches coming up for Full Gear on Saturday and added the last bit of tension before it all kicks off in a few days. That Kingston-Moxley confrontation was remarkable and gets added to the list of top-tier moments Dynamite has brought us in 2020. I'm so ready for the PPV on Saturday and the enjoyment it's expected to bring to wrestling fans. So yeah, again, a lot of people really, really stoked about the Kingston and Moxley there. And again, like I think we were sort of saying, just what was already a very, very hot and intense feud just got ramped up a little bit tonight.
See, the other big question that Raymond alluded to here was the rating for this show. Certainly, I don't know if AEW would have expected going up against... I mean, they probably would have expected going up against, post-election coverage, but tonight was election coverage. Like we're still, as of now at least, deep in the middle of this race. So I wonder how that'll really affect both NXT and AEW's ratings this week. And if so, I can't really imagine that you can look too much into it. It's like they were up against the biggest story in the world. So we shall see tomorrow. Finally, we end with Anthony, who says 17 years ago, Saliva's hit song Always was the theme for Survivor Series 2002. Tonight, Saliva returned to AEW Dynamite to perform their new single, Constant, because between Isaiah Cassidy spitting a kiss toward the camera and the Moxley Kingston face-to-face, I thought the amount of fluids going on was cringeworthy. Still a good go-home show for Full Gear. And that wraps it up. An extended edition of Rewind-A-Dynamite, but there's a lot to talk to Bruce Lord about. And thank you so much. I thought a very insightful, good chat. So and always a pleasure to be able to have John Pollock take some much needed time off, as I think difficult as it might be for the man who's so busy sometimes. So where can people find you and hear more of you?
I don't really have much in the way of a wrestling presence, apart from, just my Grapple account, which is just Contra Soma, the same name that I use on the post forum there. The one thing I would like to mention is that my friend Alex Kennedy and I, Alex is also a big wrestling fan and fan of Post. We've been running a music website and podcast for nearly 10 years, which discusses what we like to call darker alternatives. And by that, we're mostly talking about industrial music, goth music, dark wave, post-punk, and so on. Kind of similar genres, I would think, to what fellow postmark Brett Chittenden spins on his radio show. If you happen to like wrestling and you're into that sort of thing, if you like, classic acts like Skinny Puppy, The Sisters of Mercy, or Front 242, there's the callback to the number off the top there. Yeah. Okay. If you're interested in learning about exciting new bands who are working in these styles, bands like Youth Code, Drab Majesty, or Three Teeth, you can find our website at idieudie.com, or you can look for our weekly We Have a Technical podcast on all of the usual podcast outlets. If you're looking for a jumping on point, we specifically made episode 201 to be a kind of an entryway or an on-ramp for new listeners. So yeah, that's where I am.
Sorry, again, I Die, You Die.
idieudie.com, and the podcast is called We Have a Technical. Both references to Gary Newman songs, actually.
And on Twitter, you can be found at Contra Soma, where I believe you link to at least some of the things that you mentioned. So we'll try to link to as much as we can in the show description as well. But thank you so much, Bruce, for joining us. Definitely hoping to have you on again. I imagine sometime in the near future, in fact. So we'll probably be hearing from you again. And thank you all for listening. I'll be back on Friday with John, and it'll be a whole new world, I imagine. So take care. Goodbye.